this one here. So this is a small office. Obviously this stuff all scales really well. And I'll pick a blue. I didn't do very well in art at school, which I'm sure you can see already. In fact, let's make all of these other ones blue for now. Alright, so the red PCs, I'll say the blue is, say, your human resources. That's your human resources department. The red ones are finance. Now this is a small example. What if you had 100 devices on the finance network and on HR you had 50? Most of the traffic, I would suggest to you, for the HR team will be passing in between the HR departments. Finance, most of the traffic will be passing between the finance teams. They'll be sharing data, they'll have the same share on your server, and they'll be sending each other messages. So really, what's the point in all these devices sharing all the same information? The first fundamental thing is what we're going to do is configure the switch so that these devices are all in the same VLAN. So any information that needs to go out to the HR team stays on the HR team. It's a bit like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, if you've seen the film. The other, and this is a fundamental thing that you really need to understand, is if there's a broadcast on a VLAN, it stays within the VLAN. So this is a broadcast domain in its very own right. Now let's go back to the finance team. Now if you're colourblind, I do apologise. But the same rule is going to apply to these guys here. So any information that needs to be shared with the finance team stays within the finance team. And again, this is its own, I'll just put B-cast and B''cast. This is its own broadcast domain as well. So if there is a fault on the network, or if there are broadcasts sent legitimately, only the devices within the finance team will be affected. This is very good for you. Now remember, this is a small scale diagram. You could have, well, you would have multiple switches. You could have the finance team on the first floor and the fifth floor of your building. And remember, companies expand. They buy out other companies. They just get bigger. They move to the office next door because they've got more employees. So this whole thing is going to be very scalable. I'll show you how to do it later, but basically you can plug people in to the finance VLAN and they will happily continue working as if they're on the same LAN. Remember what the Cisco definition said at the very start. All these devices here believe they're on the same local area network, which is good for you as a network administrator. So a couple of rules about VLANs. The first thing I've already pointed out is the fact that all the devices here are basically part of the same broadcast domain. So you have to remember, and you have to think about this when you're configuring everything, that if you put a device into a VLAN, for example, say you call it VLAN 10, and we'll cover numbering later, all the devices within that VLAN will be part of the same broadcast domain. The other thing, and I've seen this mistake made many times, See which colour I'm using. Okay, so we've got the finance team. The finance, because they believe they're on the same local area network, they must share the same subnet address. Now I'll cover that in another lecture, but say for example you've got the 10 network. Now this wouldn't be efficient for a small company, but say all the finance teams must start with the 10 dot whatever IP address. That is the rule. And we'll go back to the blue here. The HR team will put those on the 172.16.x network. So we're not using VLSM here, but I want to keep the example nice and simple. So all the devices are on the 172.16 network. So that's the second rule. The first one is they're all on the same broadcast domain. The second one is each VLAN must have its own subnet number. Now this leads us on to another rule. Say for example, and this will happen, you obviously at some point would like to send messages from the HR team to the finance team. Well, this is a network layer address. Layer 2 addresses are MAC addresses. So if you're going to communicate based upon IP address, and I'm sure you know what's come in. Let me find a colour that I haven't used yet. Oh, this will do. What you need to have attached to your switch, again we'll cover this, is a layer 3 device, and I'll just draw it here. So that's my poor attempt at drawing a router. Why would you need a router? A router is a directory of networks. So this is the whole point of having a layer 3 device. Layer 2 devices, if I put L2 here, your traditional switch is a layer 2. Very quick. This is hardware based. So what that means to you and I is it can send frames to different ports very, very quickly and make layer 2 decisions. If you want to route between networks, the way IP works is it has to then use the layer 3 address. And I'm sure you've read about ARP. We'll be covering that in another lecture, I'm sure. But basically, there has to be a mapping between the layer 2 address, which is your network card address, and the layer 3. And the only device we can have for that at the moment is a layer 3 device. When you go onto your CCNP, you'll see that you can actually have cards within the switch, layer 3 cards, supervisor modules, depending on the model of switch you have, and that will do your layer 3 decisions for you. The last thing I'd like to make while we're on this point, I've got this diagram open, is how many devices should you have on your per VLAN. With Cisco say, and we're not going to go into CCDA stuff, but they say around, or maximum, sorry, of 500. I'm not telling you here that you must get to the number 500 before you create another VLAN. This is really going into the sort of design side of things, and it all depends on how much traffic. For example, computer aided design, CAD, takes up a huge amount of bandwidth, and if you're designing a network for an architecture company, you may need to think things through very differently. Again, this isn't the place for me to give design advice, but I just wanted to point out what Cisco say is their recommended maximum for VLANs. And again, it's different for every switch as well.